This is Jamey with Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite mechanism in Edge of Darkness, which just happens to have the expansion on Kickstarter right now. Complete coincidence, I just happened to play it for the first time the other day. Edge of Darkness looks kind of, well, it does look like this. Here's some photos from it, back to the low-tech version of my videos. So here is the board. There's a lot of components. So there's board, there's variable locations, there are miniatures, there's a giant, really cool dice tower, and there are a ton of card sleeves and clear cards that you put into those sleeves to build cards throughout the game. Those cards at the end of the game might look something like this. They're three-tiered cards. So you start out with like the top tier, I think usually the top tier, and then you insert the middle and the bottom tier throughout the game if you want to, and sometimes you don't want to or can't, and so you end up with a blank card like this. I may have forgotten to do it at one point in the game. There's a phase in the game where you do this. And phases are actually what I wanted to talk about today, because usually in games, I don't like phases. I like turns where you just do one thing and the next person takes their turn. I really like games without rounds or phases. That continuous flow of play I really enjoy. But there are exceptions to that. I even have a video, I'll try to remember to post a link below, of exceptions to my gaming preferences in games that I actually really enjoy. And Edge of Darkness has kind of an exception to that rule, which is it does have phases throughout each round. So it has the type of phases that I typically really don't like, which is that every round all players do this one thing. And then all players do this other thing in phase 2. And then all players do this other thing in phase 3. And phase 1 is kind of set up, upkeep kind of stuff. It's mainly phase 2 and phase 3. But it actually is very important in Edge of Darkness, which is why I wanted to talk about today as my favorite mechanism. Because in phase 2, I believe, if I'm getting this correct, in phase 2, there's a essentially an action drafting phase where you are selecting these cards that have already been, some have been built, some of them haven't really been built all that much. You're selecting them from here. You can kind of see a very hint of it here in the corner here. There's a card row of, I believe, about 6 cards, and you are selecting a certain number of cards from that row to build your hand, depending on some abilities you've unlocked and cards that you already have that you're ready to add to that pile. But typically you're adding between really 0 and even 5 in our game. We might have actually gotten up to 6. 0 to 6 cards from that card river into your hand, and then during your turn you're spending them. And this is where the phases come in, because the first phase is actually gaining those cards. So I'll take a turn where I just gain those cards, put them in my hand, and the next player goes, next player goes. The next phase is when you actually use those cards to take actions during the round. And what we found in our game is that phase 3 could take a while. There was a little bit of downtime in that phase, in a 4-player game in particular. I was still fully engaged. It wasn't a problem. But it did take a while. And so I really, really like, and in hindsight, I really admire that they broke out the first phase from that phase, to reduce the downtime, because if those phases were combined, if on your turn you are drafting cards and using them, it would have really prolonged the game, the downtime, because each turn would have taken that much longer. And also, you can't really plan ahead. If they were combined, it would be really tough to plan ahead for your turn. Whereas, and this is the thing that I love the most about this, because you are able to draft the cards in a separate phase from when you actually use them, you can plan ahead for your turn. You draft those cards, and then while other players are doing stuff, you can just mainly focus on your hand of cards, your actions to use that turn, and plan ahead for exactly what you're going to do on your turn, so that downtime can be reduced. Doesn't always happen in our teaching game. We didn't do that all that well, but I recognize that is very much built into the game on purpose. And this is just, I'll reiterate that it's really important, because if they were combined, if that was combined with the drafting phase, on your drafting turn, you're just kind of like, you cannot plan ahead for your drafting turn. You can maybe spot a card or two that you were hoping to get, but another player is very likely going to get that card, and the cards are going to shift down, and you're going to see new cards that you didn't know were there before. So it's really, really helpful to have those phases separated. The public drafting phase from a public pool is separated from the action phase, where you're using those things to actually take actions during the game. Really clever use of phases, something I never really thought I'd say. And I'm glad Edge of Darkness showed me the light. Oh, look at that pun. To how phases can actually be effective in games. If you have a different favorite mechanism in Edge of Darkness, and there are a lot of mechanisms in this game with the sleeve cards, the dice tower, all this other stuff, feel free to mention it in the comments. Or if you have another game that has this style of phases where you think it's actually really important and for the betterment of the game that it has those phases, I'd love to hear about that in the comments as well. Thanks.